Hello. So I've decided I want to do a little series for the month of August because there's a lot of exciting content stuff coming out in this month. So this is part 1 of 4. This is going to be talking about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Next one's going to be about Heartstopper Season 2, High School Musical, the Musical, the Series Season 4, and then Red, White, Royal Blue. That's what's going to be happening. I know they all have like nothing to do with each other, but that's not the point. It's just fun for me. So basically, this book and this series, I just finished the series in August, which is why this is part of this. It's like so good. Blew me away. Like, I read the first book like last year, and then I read the second 2 books literally just like days ago. Shook me to my core. So good. So I decided, in the true honor of, you know, like the cover of this and everything and the murder mystery of it all, I'm going to make a little like board and explain the entire plot of all 3 books, but that's gonna take so long, so this will be, I'm gonna be missing a lot of details. So if you want the full nitty-gritty, you should totally read the books because they're really good. So that's what's happening. So I'm just gonna start. So I'm just gonna get straight into the plot of book 1, which is obviously A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, out of the trilogy. So we're just gonna start off with our main character. Also, first I do want to say I have cards for every character, and the size and the color of the card does matter, but I'm not gonna explain it. So like, if they're a less important character, they're gonna be a smaller card, and I have, if it's like an evil character, I have a certain color, and if it's like a good character, I have a color, so it doesn't matter. But Pippa is our main character, and basically this all starts because she is doing a senior project where she has to, it's basically just like a random do whatever you want kind of thing. So she just has to do her project on a murder case that took place in her town 5 years ago that she believes is like incorrect. She doesn't think who was guilty, and she thinks there's more to the story, and she wants to figure it out. So to really give you background, I'm gonna talk about that murder case right now. So, oh, perfect, the air just turned on, love that. So the murder case was the murder of Andy Bell. Andy Bell was just a girl in the town who one day went missing and then was declared murdered. However, they never found her body, so suspicious. And then the person who they deemed was guilty for the murder was Sal Singh. And so that's just what was determined, that's how it's always been, and that's what people believe in the town. So why question it? Well, Pip does. So I'll give you an insight onto what people think the story is. So on the night of the murder, Sal Singh was hanging out with 4 friends, and that was me, Max Hastings, Naomi Ward, and then his 2 other friends who were kind of irrelevant, named Millie and Jake. So they were all there that night, and originally on the morning when Andy went missing and people began to suspect Sal a little bit, they called in the 4 friends as his alibis, and they were like, yeah, Sal was with us the whole time. He was with us until like midnight, past midnight, and so he wouldn't have had time to do the murder that night. Then, however, a few days later, they went back on their word and said that he left at 10:30, and that he was just like, he told them to say that he left at midnight so that he was covered, but they went back on it, which would have made him have enough time to do the murder. So it got rid of his alibi. So that's a little suspicious. So that's what people believe happened. So knowing all of this info, Pippa begins her research. So she first talks to this guy named Stanley Forbes. I'll put him over here. He's like relevant, but like not really that relevant. But he's the first person she talks to, and he is very anti-Sal Singh. He's like immediately no. He's like, oh, he was guilty. He murdered that girl. All of this stuff. Very aggressive with it. And Pippa's like, okay, thank you, but like, you can go. So then the next person she talks to is she goes and knocks on the door of the Singh's house, Sal's family. And who answers the door? It's none other than Ravi Singh. So Ravi answers the door. Ravi is Sal's brother. And so basically in this town, everyone is kind of like very wary of the Singhs. They think that Sal is so guilty and they like don't even want to speak to the family anymore. So Ravi has had like a very bad experience of like, you know, people might come up to his door and like knock and be like, your brother's a murderer, and that's, you know, it's rough. So when Pip comes up to the door and she's like, I want to do a project on it, Ravi's hesitant at first, but like eventually he's like, sure. And you know, he's kind of on board. He gets into it, but he's like, why do you care about this case? And it's a very valid question, because like she didn't really have any relation, really, like she wasn't really close friends with either of them. But here's the thing, her best friend ever is Kara Ward, who you might recognize. That is Naomi's sister. So Pip being very close friends with Kara, and Kara's sister being Naomi, and Naomi being very close friends with Sal, they were like, you know, they were around each other a lot, and it was just kind of like acquaintances. And so Pip being around him was just like, Sal was such a good person that it was like she does not believe that he could have done that. And so she tells Ravi that, and he's like, okay, period, let's do this, let's solve this murder. So now let's get I don't know, get familiar with Andy Bell's family and perhaps our first suspect. So, and I'll put them right here. Okay, so that's Becca Bell, who is Andy's little sister, and then Jason Bell, who is their dad. And our first suspect, ew, there's hair on it. Our first suspect is Jason Bell, and that little star means that he's a suspect. It's not very threatening, but yeah. So Becca Bell, not really relevant for now. She'll come back later, but Jason Bell is Pip's first suspect because her and Robbie are kind of just going through. They go through Sal's phone, they try to see, you know, put some pieces together that haven't already been put together, going over the already made evidence. And so they're looking at police reports where they see that Jason Bell, he's doing an interview talking about Andy, and it was like a day, or it was probably the day after Andy went missing, and he was already talking about Andy in past tense as if she had already died, and he knew that, which, like, not super suspicious, but if your daughter went missing, you probably wouldn't be saying like, oh, Andy was like such a great, like, whatever. It was a little suspicious to Pip, and so she makes him her first suspect. Okay, so then Pip's thinking about who could be other potential suspects, and so the excuse for like what's going on with these friends down here, what was going on when they claimed that Sal allegedly left at 10:30. I don't know what Jake was doing, I really don't, but he was somewhere else and he was like fine. But then Max and Millie said that they were down in the basement playing video games, and Naomi said that she was just upstairs and like no one really saw her. And Naomi also had a crush on Sal, but he was dating Andy, and so it was like there might have been some bad blood there, and just her being upstairs for such a long amount of time with no one seeing her, she could have snuck out and came back in and killed someone. So Pip thinks she's a suspect. That's so cute. So yeah, Naomi is now a suspect. And then we all talk to Elliot Ward, who is the Wards' father. Can you even see that? Yeah. Okay. So Kara Ward and Naomi Ward's dad, Elliot, is a teacher at the school, and so Pip is like, sure, let's talk to Elliot, let's see what's going on. And Pip has considered Elliot like her second dad. Like, she's because she's best friends with Kara, so like she's, you know, she trusts Elliot. So she's like talking to him about like if he noticed anything weird, because he was really close with Sal, because he was like helping Sal get into Yale and all this stuff, and he's like a very high esteemed teacher and stuff. And he's also said that he hadn't spoken to Andy like 2 years up until when she disappeared, so there wasn't much to go off of there other than just like he knew Sal and he didn't really know Andy. So then Pip takes it upon herself to have a little conversation with Chloe and Emma, who are friends of Andy's. I guess I'll put them down here on their own little island because they don't really come back a lot, but they do give some helpful information. They actually give quite a bit of information. They give her 3 things. They tell her that Andy had some mystery source of money, and it wasn't her parents. It was just like coming from somewhere, and it was weird. And she had some older secret mystery man that she was like cheating on Sal with, so tea. And then also that she had a fight with Elliot Ward the week before she disappeared. So Pip is immediately like, well, Mr. Ward just told me that he hadn't spoken to her 2 years before she disappeared. So she goes back to Elliot and she's like, what's going on? They just told me that you had a whole fight with her. He gives some more information, and he says that there was this whole thing, it was crazy, this whole thing with Andy bullying this girl named Natalie Da Silva, aka Nat Da Silva. Where should I put Nat? I'm gonna put Nat up here, actually. Yeah. Nat Da Silva was being bullied by Andy Bell because Andy was getting pictures of her topless and videos of her topless and like sending around the whole school. Andy was a really nasty person. But yeah, so he basically told Andy, he was like, I'm not going to tell the school about this because that'll get you expelled, so I'm just going to tell your dad. And that's going to be because I don't want to get expelled. And so Andy was really mad at him for doing that, and so he was like, that's why she was like yelling at me in the hallway or whatever. And so Pip decides to look more into this whole like, oh, she was bullying this girl named Natalie. She eventually finds out that Natalie left a death threat in her locker on the week leading up to when she disappeared. And so, oh, the fans like it. I love that. So Pip is immediately like, that's very suspicious, and Natalie Da Silva is now, oh my god, suspect number 3. To add on to the Natalie thing, Natalie also has a brother named Daniel Da Silva, and he is one of the police officers in the town. And Pip finds out that when Andy was 15, her and Daniel had a relationship, and that she was like blackmailing Natalie to like get stuff from Natalie to keep Natalie's brother out of trouble. And so there's a lot of stuff there. Like Daniel probably was mad about what was happening to his little sister. He's also was also like the head police officer or something on the search of Andy's room. He had like first access to everything, so it was a little suspicious. And so Daniel Da Silva is also a suspect. Okay, so next there's this girl named Jess, who I'm gonna put right next to Max. So Jess basically gives Pip this little information that before Andy died, like really close to it, she saw Max Hastings and Andy Bell kind of like together at a party in a suspicious manner because Andy had a boyfriend. And so Pip approaches Max about this, and she's like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, nothing was going on, and he like tries to explain it away. She goes into his house and she sees in his room, I think, a topless photo of Andy. And so she's like, what is going on? What was happening? Because also leading up to Andy's death, Sal and Andy were having a lot of fights, and so there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of like, because they had Sal's phone, so they had text messages, and so they had like a lot of like cryptic sort of angry messages. And so she was like, well, maybe this is involved with Max or something. And so Max is like, no, but I was buying drugs from Andy, which completely checks out because Andy's secret form of making money, she had all this like designer stuff, but her parents didn't give her an allowance, and like she didn't have a job. So her dealing drugs makes perfect sense. And so she's like, okay, got it. And so then what Pip does, Pip is crazy. Pip breaks into a calamity party, which a calamity party is like what they call the big like high school parties in their town, Fairview. So she breaks into a calamity party and she tries to find the source of like where Andy was getting her drugs to sell to the people at school. And she comes across a man named Howie Bowers, who I'm gonna put right over here, as close as I can to Andy. So Andy's buying drugs from Howie Bowers. And so Pip and Robbie, they literally go up and they are like in Howie's business. They're following him home. They go to his house and they knock on his door and they're like, tell us what you know about Andy Bell. And so he basically tells them that like, yes, he sold drugs to Andy Bell. She would sell them to the people at school. And he like gave her a burner phone, which is suspicious. And she would hide all her stuff in this loose floorboard in her room. And so Pip's like, oh, I gotta get in her room somehow. So Pip breaks into the Bell's house, like during school. Like she's supposed to be at school. She's like breaking into their house. And so she goes up to Andy's room and she finds the loose floorboard, but it's empty. And to just recall, our suspect Daniel De Silva was the first to search Andy's room. So if he had anything to do with that, he would have been able to find the floorboard. That also rings alarms for Pip. So that's very suspicious. So like that's empty, so it's not that much of a big deal, but they do find some other stuff in the room, such as Andy's planner, which gives a lot of details. So in Andy's planner, there were like a few like coded messages. There's a thing that said HH, which they assumed meant Howie's house. There's a thing that said IV, which they were like, oh, we don't know what this is. And then there's this thing that said TS, which was like train station, but IV was the one that they were really wondering about. They're like, what's IV? And then they discovered Ivy House Inn, which is this little like inn in Fairview. And so they were like, we're gonna go take a trip to Ivy House Inn. So they go, and the lady at the desk is like very weird. They're like, we're looking for this girl, or like they said something about Andy Bell, and the lady at the desk was like, oh yeah, I saw her like last week. And they were like, no, I don't think you did. But then like the dude came up and he was like, oh, don't worry about her, she's just like messing around, or she had like I think she had like Alzheimer's or something. But he like they took a look around the hotel in whatever anyway, and they went into the bathroom and they saw in the bathroom that the tile of the wall was the same exact tile that was in the background of the topless photo that Max Hastings had of Andy Bell. So they're like, well, Andy was definitely here, this definitely means something. What could be going on? But they connected those pieces together and they're like, maybe Max was there with her, maybe he wasn't. And like at this point, oh, why didn't I put the, okay, yeah, because of the topless photo and the drugs and all that stuff. Max, okay, there's hair on it, whatever. Put that right there. Max is the, at this point, #1 suspect. They think Max is the most sus. So yeah, and then to go further in, they break into Naomi, I believe, Naomi's Facebook account, and then find Max's secret Facebook account, where on this account they find a photo from the night that Andy disappeared, where the 5 of them are hanging out. It's a photo of the 4 of them, and the time on Naomi's phone, like in the picture, it's very like buried in the background, but the time on her phone says like 12:10 a.m., which allegedly, according to their story, Sal would have already left. So if Sal already left, then why is there a picture for them and like someone else is taking the picture? So that is when they finally like, that's their final like concrete piece, that Sal was still there when he said he was. He didn't leave at 10:30 like they all claimed he did. He left at 12:15 like he said. So Pip brings this up to Naomi immediately and she's like, why did you lie about when he left? Like he was still there at 12:10. And she uncovers this whole other piece about the fact that these fools got into a car crash in like a year before or something, and they got into like a brutal car accident, and they like hit another man, and the man was like in his car, looked dead, and Max Hastings was like, oh, we can't get in trouble, so we just have to go. Like, we just have to leave him here. And they all thought he was dead. He ended up not being dead, but they were like, we just don't want to get in trouble. And so basically they start getting anonymous texts when they were like, oh yeah, Sal was still here at 12 whatever a.m. They started getting anonymous texts being like, if you don't say that Sal left at 10:30, I'm gonna share about your whole car crash and leaving a man there to die. And so they were all like, well, we know Sal didn't do it, so even if we aren't his alibi, they'll prove it wrong or something. Like, there will be some other evidence, because they know he didn't do it, which obviously ended up not being true. But that is why they all changed their alibi, and they were like, no, he left at 10:30. So that's a whole other piece of information. Then I don't really know how to transition into this because I literally haven't even brought it up this whole video, but Pip actually has a dog this whole time. The dog is just like there throughout the whole book. His name is Barney. And where should I put Barney? I'll put Barney right here. So throughout the book, Pippa has been getting threats to like stop looking. She's been getting like text threats, notes in her locker, like printed out things, emails, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of threats. There was even, oh my god, one of the spookiest, there was a time when she went camping with her friends. I didn't make cards for Lauren, Ant, and Zach because they're just so irrelevant. But Pip has some other friends that I haven't mentioned, and they all went camping, and they like heard someone in the woods, and they thought it was a person, and Pip like ran after them. She went back to her sleeping bag, and there was a note in her sleeping bag that was like, stop looking. Spooky. But so Barney the dog, essentially, I don't know how to transition into this, but the dog gets killed by this person, you know, we assume the person behind the whole Sal and Andy thing, who wants Pippa to stop trying to find out that it's him or her. Don't worry about that. So the Barney dies essentially, and so that is like a really big breaking point for Pip. She's like, she goes to Robbie and she's like, Robbie, I cannot do this anymore. Like, people, like, my dog died. It's actually so tragic. But Robbie convinces her. He's like, no, we've come so far. We have this whole, there's so much going on. We know Sal didn't do it. We got to do this. And so she's like, okay, we can do this final stretch. And so then Pip gets a call. I believe this is next. Pip gets a call from a phone number that was written in Andy's planner where she found out about the Ivy House Inn. There was also a phone number written, and she gets a call from this phone number, and she's like, oh my god, this is so connected to Andy. And she picks up the phone, and it's Naomi Ward. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy that you're calling me from this number. But she doesn't say that. And she's like, Naomi, why aren't you using your like actual phone number? And Naomi's like, oh, my phone like broke or something, or I lost it or something. And yeah, I just picked up this old SIM card that was in the bottom of, where is he? Hello? Oh, the bottom of my dad's drawer. And the fan is back on for dramatic effect. Thank you. So Elliot Ward's SIM card, the phone number on it was in Andy's diary. This man that claims he had no interaction with Andy 2 years before she died. So that's very suspicioso. And so at this point, earlier in the book, Pip did something on the Ward's family computer because she was suspicious of Naomi, and she was getting all these printed out threats. She did something on their computer where it was like tracking what printed from the computer and what was printed from the printer. And so she goes onto it and she sees that her threats and stuff were coming from the Ward's family computer. And so she's immediately like, Elliot Ward did it. And so, okay, I don't have another, I'll take Naomi's off. I should take Nat's off too. I love Nat. Elliot Ward is now the suspect. She's like, boom, it's her. Actually, I'm gonna take them all off. Oh my god. This is so much work. The De Silvas, innocent. I'm leaving Max's up. You'll see why. But yeah. Elliot Ward is number one suspect now. Pip practically knows that he did it. So what she does is she's like, we need to like figure out what's going on here. And so every every few days, there's like a schedule, I don't remember what days, Elliot Ward goes to tutoring at like Stanford or something. And the Wards make plenty of money, so Pip is like, why is he going to tutoring? And so she's a little suspicious of it. So what she does is she makes a little DIY tracker with her phone. She shares her location from her phone to Robbie's phone, and then one day after school, before he goes off to tutoring, Pip is like, oh, can I have a ride home? And she slyly leaves her phone in Elliot's car. And so she tracks his phone. She like goes and meets up with Robbie, and they track his phone, and they see that he's not going to Stanford. He's going to his old house that he allegedly sold. His whole family thought he sold it, but he's going there in time after school every week. And they're immediately like, I would never come to this conclusion, but they're immediately like, he's keeping Andy alive in there because Andy's body was never found, which is very weird, because like, how would you not find it? So they're like, he's keeping Andy's body, he's keeping Andy alive in there, and we need to go confront him and figure it out. So then what happens, Pip being literally so reckless and brave, she late that night goes to the house where Elliot Ward is, and she calls the police, and she's like, so this man's holding this girl captive in here. I'm going in, but y'all should be here soon. And they're like, hello, don't go in. And she's like, well, I'm going in. So Pip goes right in there and confronts Elliot Ward, and she's like, Elliot, I know what you've done. Like, I know what's going on. It's over. And that's when Elliot Ward confesses to everything that he's done. So this is Elliot's story of what he did. Basically, Elliot and Andy, Elliot was the secret older man, by the way. So him and Andy were having this like relationship, really weird. He is where Max got the topless photo of Andy. It was in his classroom. Like, that's insane. But basically, they were, you know, doing that. And one night Andy came to his house, and she was really mad. I think she was really mad about the bullying thing still, about him telling her dad. And so she was just really, really mad. And so she starts like destroying his house, breaking all his things. And he gets really mad, and he like shoves her, and she hits her head really hard. And he's like, oh my gosh, oh no. And so he runs out of the room into another room to get a first aid kit. And so while he's going to get the first aid kit, he comes back, and she's suddenly gone. And he's like, oh. He's like, okay. And then he wakes up the next morning, and he finds out that she's suddenly missing. And he's like, oh no, like, this girl like is dead somewhere in the world, and I'm gonna be connected back to it. I gotta like cover myself. What this psychopath does, he then, because as I said, him and Sal were close because he was helping Sal get into Yale. He's like, oh, Sal, come over to my house. And Sal's like, oh, I have a headache. And and Elliot's like, oh, here's some medicine that'll help you with your headache. And it's just like straight up like, I don't know what kind of drug, but like not something that'll help with your headache. He gives him a lot of drugs. And then he's like, oh, let's go to the woods and look for Andy. So dumb. They go out into the forest, like deep in the forest. And Elliot said he gives him more pills, and so Sal like overdoses, and then Elliot puts a bag over his head and then leaves Sal there to die. And he plants Andy's phone on Sal, so it makes it look like even more suspicious. And basically he just sets up this whole scene to make it seem like Sal did it and not Elliot. So this whole thing happens, and then Elliot's like, and then like, I don't know how much after all this happened, but like sometime after he killed Sal, he sees this girl, Andy. He literally sees Andy like on the road. And he's like, oh my gosh, oh no, what? Andy's not dead? Like, what's happening? Because again, they never found a body. So he was like, oh my gosh, Andy's not dead. She's been wandering around. And he's like, I can't let anyone else see her, because then if she's not dead, then why would Sal be dead? It wouldn't make sense anymore. And they would reinvestigate the case, and they might find me. So he just took this girl, took Andy, and kept her in his old house for literally 5 years. And as he's saying this, he's like, yeah, and I've kept Andy in this house for years. Pip immediately is like, oh my god, Andy's in this house. And she like runs upstairs and she goes and she finds this girl. And she looks at Andy and she's like, this isn't Andy. Like, literally, how embarrassing is that? You've been doing all this for years and it's just simply not Andy. Like, come on, bro. So yeah. He was just keeping this literal random girl that was not Andy, that just like looked like her, and she was so like out of it that she eventually convinced herself as well that she was Andy. So like it just like worked out for Elliot, I guess. But Pip is like, no, this isn't Andy. So like, what happened to Andy? And so the police show up and they arrest Elliot for kidnapping this random girl and also killing Sal Singh. But now, like, you know, like, she's figured out the Sal side of how Sal died. She still doesn't know who killed Andy and like what's going on there. So she re-examines, I don't know, speaks to Max Hastings, because again, he still was doing all the drug things, and so she was like asking him more about drugs. And she finds out that he was using the drugs Andy gave him to drug and rape girls at these calamity parties. And he did it to Becca Bell, Andy's little sister. And so Pip finds this suspicious. She's like, maybe there's some connection to Max raping and like drugging and raping Andy's little sister. Like maybe there's something there. Which is why I left a little star up by Max's name, because although he didn't kill anyone, he is the most suspicious man I've ever seen. And it's so scary that I know someone in real life that is like that. Anyway, so then what's her name? Pip. Pip goes to talk to Becca Bell, and she's like, we're gonna talk about this. So she goes over to the Bell's house, and you know, like, Becca makes her tea. They sit down and she's like, okay, so like what happened that night? And Becca really opens up. So basically Becca shares her whole story, that same night, the night that Elliot thought he killed Andy, and she like wandered out and like died on the floor somewhere in the woods, she actually came home to the Bell's house. Like, she wasn't that injured that she couldn't come home. And so at home, Becca found her, and it was like right after Max had drugged and raped her. And so Becca was like so distraught, obviously, and was looking like, it was just like so distraught. And I'm pretty sure Becca knew that Andy was the one that sold Max the drugs that he used to drug her. And so she talked to Andy about it, and Andy was horrible. Andy was a horrible person, just to put that out there. And so she was being really, really horrible to Becca about the whole situation. And so when Andy just happened to be standing in, you know, her house, and she's got so much head trauma from being shoved by Elliot Ward, and she just like starts to choke and like die. She literally just starts to like choke on like blood or whatever was going on. There was just a lot happening on her head. She starts to like choke, and Becca just like stands there and watches her because she doesn't really know what's happening, and she's mad at her. And so Andy Bell died right in front of Becca, and Becca just stood there. And then Becca kind of like realized what had happened, and she was like, oh my god, I can't, they're gonna see that I just like let her die right in front of me. This is bad. So Becca, okay, this is where Becca, up until this point, I'm like, okay, you know, she was really horrible to you. Like, she was saying stuff like, because Max raped her, Andy was saying to Becca, she was like, well, at least someone like wants you. Like, oh, it was bad. Becca then takes Andy's body in her trunk, takes her to Jason Bell, their dad's like work warehouse place, and puts her in the septic tank. She put her body in the septic tank, and that's why Andy's body was never found, because it was in the septic tank. It's so gross. So then that is like revealed of how the Andy side of things happened. So like Sal had literally nothing to do with it. And so like while all this is happening, you know, Becca and Pip were talking. As I said, Becca gave Pip some tea, and of course that tea was drugged. So Becca just drugged Pip while confessing all of this, and she just assumed that, like, she was like, that's why Becca just like confessed to it so openly, because she was like, well, I'm gonna kill Pip right now anyway. So, because Pip was like so close on everyone's trails, like everyone was out to get Pip. So, however, remember when I said that Pip turned on her tracker to find out where Elliot was going at night? The tracker was still on, and so Ravi saw that. Ravi? Hello? Ravi. Ravi saw that Pip was at Becca's house and was like, that's suspicious. Why is she at Becca's house? And so he got Pip's dad, and Ravi and Pip's dad show up at Becca's house as Becca's literally like choking Pip. And they save the day, and they get all the evidence that Becca's also guilty. And so then essentially Becca went to jail, Elliot went to jail, Max Hastings is under like investigation because of all the stuff he did. And that's kind of, I mean, they solved it. Basically, Elliot killed Sal and Becca killed Andy. Well, Becca didn't kill Andy. Elliot essentially killed both of them. Excuse me. So that is how it was solved. But at the end of this, what the outcome was that Pip, because all this came about just because of a school project, so Pip had to like present this project eventually, and so she presented it, but it was literal like national news. Like there was like CNN reporters at her presentation, and so yeah, it was like made huge news, and she was like the girl that solved the murder in our town, and it was really great. And that's kind of the end of book 1. So that's fun. Now what we're gonna kind of do to transition between book 1 and book 2 is kind of just take off the characters that are meaningless in book 2. So like, for example, Elliot Ward literally never comes back. He's just in jail now. Elliot Ward never comes back. You know, these, oh, not my low battery. These side characters never return. Sorry Millie, sorry Jake, miss you. Sorry Emma, Chloe. Barney never comes back because Barney's dead. I'm so sorry. R.I.P. Sal Singh and Andy, I mean, I'll talk about them for like literally a second, but they're not really, obviously they're dead, so like they're dead and gone. So Becca Bell, even, I'm gonna leave Becca Bell like over here. She's not, never mind, they don't even talk about her in this book, so we'll leave her like down there. But she's kind of gone. They're still here. Stanley Forbes is still here. Ravi, Pip, Kara's of course still here. Max is of course still here. Naomi's here. I'm gonna move Naomi up with Kara. Jason Bell, no, not really relevant. He'll come back in the 3rd book. But then Howie Bowers, he's not, no. He's like adjacently relevant, but like not really. Maybe I'll put him back up when we need him, but maybe I won't. So yeah, here's what we got going on. Now on to book 2, Good Girl, Bad Blood. So this book starts, and essentially Pip has like kind of got a little bit of fame now because she solved this murder mystery with ease, and she's so brave and cool. And so she decides to start a podcast because she wants to be able to like, you know, like prove the innocent people innocent and make people know that, and make the guilty people guilty and have people know that. She like wants to just spread the truth with the world. So that's what she does. So she starts a podcast called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, of course. And so the first season of the podcast is all talking about everything that happened in book 1, how she did it all. And so that adds a new element of like, you know, people are kind of looking at her now. People at school are like, oh my gosh, she's like doing a podcast. Some people are a little bit like skeptical of her because they're like, is she just doing this all for attention? What's real, what's not? That kind of thing. So it's all very interesting, but that happens at the beginning of the book. Then on the 6-year anniversary of when Andy Bell went missing, they have a little memorial, or like a funeral, for Sal and Andy. So you know, Robbie, what? Okay, Becca's gone. Becca was probably there. But like for Robbie's brothers, like Pip and Robbie are like very, you know, it's a lot going on. It's a heavy night. Um, but then that kind of happens, and then the next morning, this is when the weird stuff begins to happen. On the morning after the funeral, a boy named Connor Reynolds, I'm gonna put him here. Connor Reynolds comes up to Pip and he's like, yo, my brother Jamie is missing. We don't know where Jamie is. I don't know what the best way to format this is. I'm gonna put Connor here. I'm gonna put Jamie here. Because there's a lot happening. But so Connor is like, my brother Jamie's missing. And he had already gone to Detective Hawkins. I'm gonna put him here. Detective Hawkins, because he works with Daniel Da Silva. They're both police officers. But Detective Hawkins is like the number one. And this man does nothing. He does nothing. I don't know what he's getting paid to do, but it's not to help the town. Because, bro, Pip's doing all of it. Anyway, Detective Hawkins, like, Connor and his mom, I guess I'll just put the whole family tree up right now. So, Connor and Jamie are the sons of Arthur and Joanna. Actually, I don't want to put that there. I want to put them here. Joanna and Arthur are the mom and dad of them. And then Zoe Reynolds, I'm also just going to put over here because she's their sister, but she's literally not in the book. But I felt bad not putting her on the board. So Zoe can be over there. So the Reynolds family is here. So Jamie's missing. Connor and Joanna are mainly the ones that are like freaking out about it. Arthur is kind of like, he knows Jamie has a history of kind of leaving without saying anything, so he's a little bit more skeptical. But Connor and Joanna went to the police, and Detective Hawkins was like, I can't do anything. We're like booked up. We've got no resources to find your like 24-year-old son. Jamie's like 24 years old and has a history of kind of running away, so he's not a priority. So then Connor comes to Pip and he's like, look, I know, like, I just really think that Jamie's in trouble. I don't think this is just him running away for no reason. At first, Pip is a little like, oh, I don't really want to get back into it. The last time I got into something like this, my dog died. I ended up in the hospital. It was like a whole thing. But eventually she does come around to it, and so she goes to the Reynolds' house. Also, I should say, Connor and Pip weren't really like friends, but they were acquaintances of sorts. And so like she knew Connor, but like they weren't like Pippa and Cara kind of like close. But she goes to the Reynolds' house. And she talks to Joanna and Connor, and she's like, look, like, if I go into this and I start trying to find out where Jamie is, I'm probably going to find stuff about him that you don't want to know. And they're both like, sure, okay, whatever. And so Pip starts off by just, like, asking them some questions about, like, Jamie, about, like, how he'd been acting. And they essentially say Jamie had been acting a little, like, bipolar-ish. He was, like, happy, and then he was really sad. And he'd been on his phone a lot. And so another thing is that Jamie had a crush on Nat Da Silva. And so, oh, I have another one I can put on the board. And so when Nat Da Silva started dating the infamous Luke Eaton, where do I even put Luke? Oh my god, I'm gonna put Luke down here, which isn't gonna make sense right now, but it will. But Luke and Nat are dating. And so like that kind of, they assumed, made Jamie a little upset just because he was in love with Nat. So that was some behavioral things. I'm keeping that star on Max. Sorry, I was like, I should take that down, but no, I shouldn't. He's still suspicious. So that's like a whole thing that's going on with Jamie and Nat. And so he was like acting a little weird, but they like didn't really know. And so that's all the info Pip kind of gets. She searches his room, and all she really gets is that he has like a computer, but it's locked. So she's like, if I can get the passcode to this computer, that would be a lot. But yeah, until then, nothing's really gonna help. So she is like, okay, well, he's missing, so we can put out some missing posters and let the people know to be on the lookout for him. And so they make posters of like what he looks like, what he was wearing last, when they last saw him, all this stuff. And then they're asking for people who were like at the memorial, because Pip saw him at the memorial, and at like recognized that he was acting a little funny. And so she was like, if anyone has pictures from there, we'd love to have them, all this stuff. And so basically, I guess, okay, so they start getting pictures sent to them from the memorial, and they, at the funeral, they like lit up these lanterns, like Tangled style, like literal like fire lanterns, and like lifted them off into the air for the funeral. And while they were doing that, there's a photo of it, and like the whole crowd is like looking up at the lanterns, right? And then Jamie is like in the front, and he's looking off like past the camera into the like woods that was behind the photographer, which is like a little suspicious. Just that picture, like that image in your mind is a little spooky. And so like Pip was like, okay, that's really interesting. So maybe he was looking at something, someone, like maybe there's a person involved. There's probably a person involved. So all this happened, and then Connor, Kara, and Pippa are all going to put missing posters out across town. And like Kara comes running back to Pip, and she's like, oh my gosh, Pip, I just remembered, I think that I saw Jamie at the calamity party that was the night after, not the night after, but like after the funeral, like that night. And because they brushed past the fact that they threw a calamity party like literally 10 minutes after the funeral so quick, but I thought that was so insane. But anyway, so there was a calamity party that night, and Kara's like, I think I saw him, but like she was drunk, so she wasn't completely sure. But Pip was like, okay, let me see if anyone else saw anything. And obviously, like, people were taking pictures, videos, and all this stuff. So she sends out a message to her school, everyone in her grade, and she's like, if anyone has any videos or pictures that has this guy in the background, please send them my way. And so eventually, like, stuff starts to get sent to her, you know, stuff starts to get pieced together. And she sees a video of Jamie talking to a girl where, oh, the fan's on again. Where is Stella? Okay. She sees a video of Jamie at the party. By the way, okay, this party's for like anyone under 18, but Jamie's 24 at the party, and he was talking to a girl named Stella Chapman. Where do I put Stella? I'll put Stella here. So Stella Chapman and Jamie Reynolds are talking at a party, which is like really weird. So Pip that day at school goes up to Stella, and she's like, hey, did you talk to Jamie Reynolds at the party? And Stella's like, what? Like, she doesn't really know who it is and whatever. And Pip's like, I see this video of you talking to Jamie. And she's like, oh, that guy. So what happened in that interaction is Jamie came up to Stella and was like, oh my gosh, Layla, you changed your hair. And Stella was like, what are you talking about? She's like, who is Layla? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, Layla, it's me, Jamie. Like, we're like, you know. And Stella's like, my name's Stella, I don't know who you are. And it starts to get like aggressive. Stella starts to get a little freaked out. And so she's like, I don't know who you are, please stop talking to me, and all this stuff. Then there's another account. Oh my god, I forgot to make a card for George Thorne. But there's this boy who then later that night is like standing outside of the house around the same time, and he sees Jamie like run out of the house, and he's on the phone, and he's like talking really angry to someone on the phone, and he's talking about like, I'm gonna call the police, like I can whatever, like that kind of thing to the person on the phone. Very aggressive and kind of spooky. And so Pip kind of puts together, based on Jamie's interaction with Stella, that Jamie was probably getting catfished, which lines up with like the thing of like him being in love with Nat and then it not being reciprocated, and then him being on the phone a lot, could have been talking to someone, and him looking at Stella and being like, oh my gosh, I know you, but her being like, what? So it was assumed that Jamie's being catfished by a girl named Layla. Where's my Layla card? Okay, and also I just want to say, by this point, I'm out of tape. No. Oh. By this point, they didn't know Layla's last name, but you're seeing it right now, so don't even worry about it. And we're gonna put Layla right here. That's why I was leaving that space open. That's for Layla Mead, but they don't know her last name's Mead at this point. So they're trying to figure out who this Layla is, because at this time they don't know her last name, so they can't just like search on Instagram Layla. They're not gonna find her. So Ravi, I believe it was Ravi has the genius idea to go on Tinder and search, like, because it's in the local radius, circumference, I don't know, I don't know, in the area. And so they're scrolling on Tinder and they're scrolling and scrolling. They find a girl named Layla Mead who is using pictures of Stella Chapman on Tinder. And so they're like, bingo, we found her. And so they are like, okay, so her name is Layla Mead. So then they go on Connor's like secret private photography Instagram that's like separate from everyone else. And they use that account to look at Layla Mead's Instagram, and they find it. And something very interesting that they find is, so like they found the account, they found the pictures and everything, but what they also find is Adam Clark, who is a teacher at Pip's school, who replaced Elliot Ward. Adam Clark had liked one of Layla Mead's pictures. And so they were like, okay, there's a connection here between Adam Clark and Layla Mead. What's that about? And so they just like take note of that. And then Pip, from Connor's account, Connor's private account that does not follow Pip, and Pip does not follow him, they DM Layla and they're like, hey. And Layla responds with, what does she respond with? She responds with like, oh, she responds with, hello Pip, you're getting closer. Which is so spooky. That is really spooky. I'm not a fan. I don't like that. I don't like that. Because like, how did they know it was Pip? That's not normal. So that all happens and they're like, oh, that's scary. So quickly before I get back into the Layla Mead and then they eventually talk to Adam, two details that I don't really remember when they come about in the book, but I do just want to mention is, first of all, Jamie worked for, oh my god, where is she? Jamie worked for Pip's mom. This sucks, I'm out of tape. Oh, I have an idea actually. Okay, this is gonna be fine. Jamie worked for Pip's mom, Leanna Moby. Where do I put Leanne? Behind my head, for sure. She's not really relevant except for this one point that I just have to make. Well, okay, Pip's mom is very prevalent throughout the books, but she's mainly just like a support for Pip rather than like involved in the actual stuff. But she does give Pip a bit of information that 2 weeks before Jamie went missing, he was fired from her work, and Jamie hadn't told any of his family or anyone about this because he was caught trying to steal money off of the company credit card. And so she caught him and was like, look, I'm not gonna tell anyone, but just like, I have to fire you. Like, yeah, I can't, you know, like, you're trying to steal money from us. And Jamie was like, Jamie says I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't life or death. Which, that bit of information is freaking the Reynolds out a little bit. It's freaking everyone out a little bit, because at this point they're like, okay, he could just be like missing, like he could be fine. But then stuff like that starts to happen, like life or death, and they're like, could he be actually dead? Kind of spooky. Okay, the other thing that like led them to believe that this could be a little more serious than just like a missing persons case is there was this knife block in the Reynolds' house that like Jamie's birthday was like right before he went missing, and so in his birthday videos you can see the knife in the block, but now it's suddenly gone and they're all like searching up and down. They don't know where this knife is, and Pip just like takes note of that and they're like, okay. She's like, a knife's missing. Interesting. It's like this yellow knife that belongs in the knife block and it's gone. So she's like, what's that about? So yeah, that's a detail. And then back to Layla and Adam. So like after Layla DMs Pip, Connor, and Robbie back and is like, hello Pip, you're getting closer, she deletes everything, like deletes all her Tinder, her Instagram, everything. But what they do know is that Adam Clark had a connection with Layla. So they go and Pip blackmails her teacher and is like, if you don't tell me stuff about Layla Mead, I'm gonna tell the principal that you were liking photos of Stella Chapman. Obviously, like, it was Layla Mead using Stella's pictures, but still would not be good. So he's like, okay, I'll let you know. And so basically what he tells her is that Layla was very like asked a lot of questions about him, didn't answer many questions about herself, and as soon as he said he was a teacher, she ghosted him. So that's the info we got so far. And then then basically what happens is Pip is then able to get into Jamie's computer. She finally like breaks the code of what the password is, which then gives her access to two important things. First of all, his Instagram DMs, which is where he communicated with Layla, and it confirms like they were talking, and like, well, obviously they were talking, but like it confirms everything about the catfishing and all that, and that he was like desperately in love with her, and he was like, please, I will do anything for you, anything. And he actually at first was catfishing her a bit too, because he said that he was like 29. Yeah, he said he was 29, which is important. He said he was 29, and then eventually he was like, I'm not actually 29, I'm 24, and then she ghosted him, and he was like, please come back to me, please come back to me. And then he said, I will do anything for you, and Layla just responded with anything, question mark, and he was like, yes. And she was like, let's move this over to iMessages to like text messages rather than Instagram DMs. And so that is where Pip lost her, you know, she couldn't see the messages, but she could just see the DMs, so that's where it cut off. And then other than the DMs, it also had a track of his Fitbit activity, and it showed that on the night he went missing around like 12:30 a.m. his heart rate was like really high, and then it immediately went to 0, which either means his Fitbit was taken off, turned off, destroyed, or his heart flatlined. They don't know which one, so that's cool. Yeah, but the Fitbit did give Pip a little bit of like info, because it had his steps and all this stuff, and kind of, it didn't have location, but it had steps, and so she kind of knew the area where he could have been when his Fitbit either was destroyed, turned off, his heart stopped, whatever. So she sets up a search party and basically has a bunch of people around town just like going out and searching for him. And what they find, Kara's group, they find the yellow knife from the Reynolds' knife lock that was missing. They find it in the woods, very close to Elliot Ward's house from the first book, where he was keeping the Andy Bell, which wasn't actually Andy Bell, but it's very close to there. And so Pip is like, we need to call the police and tell them that there's a knife here that is connected to this case, that's evidence. So they call the police. While the police are on their way, Pip and Ravi, I'm pretty sure it was just them two, they go into Elliot Ward's house just to kind of like check it out. They're not really looking for anything specific, but they do see that there's like stuff, not stuff, but like wrappers and stuff everywhere. And so they're like, there are people that are like hanging out in here. There's these kids, they're just like hanging out, and they're not there at the moment, but like they are there. And so they're like, we're gonna come back tonight and we are going to see who's here and see if they know anything. So save that for later. But then the police eventually arrive to get the knife, and I'm pretty sure it's Daniel De Silva's there. I don't know if Detective Hawkins is there, but Daniel De Silva definitely is. And they go to get the knife, and he's like, Pip, you're doing it again. Because Pip is doing everything in this town. And so she's like, yeah, well, you're not doing your job. And then she's talking to him about everything that she's found out about like evidence and stuff, and like why he should be taking this seriously. And she brings up Layla Mead, and he like makes a face for a second, and she's like, what was that? And he's like, I don't know. And she puts together that Daniel De Silva knows Layla Mead and was in contact with her as well. So we're gonna put him down there because he's in the world of Layla Mead. Pretend I didn't circle Luke. Anyway, he's in the world of Layla Mead. So he was also in contact with her, and Pip is asking all the questions she can, and he kind of gives a very similar answer to Adam Clark, just very much like Layla was like asking a lot about them, not answering about her. And as soon as he told her that he was a police officer, she ghosted him. So that's all we got from Mr. De Silva. But then later that night, Pip, Ravi, Kara, and Connor, I believe, all go to the stakeout at Elliot Ward's house to try and find the kids who have been like hanging out around there to see if they know anything. So they go and they eventually find Robin, who I'm gonna steal tape from Chloe to put Robin up. So Robin was mentioned in the first book, but like wasn't really that important, hence why I didn't put him up there until now. Where do I even put? I'm gonna put Robin up here. Robin is sitting there, and Robin is like, you can't be here. Robin essentially says to Pip, you can't be here, my drug dealer is coming, and he does not want to see you. So they're like, oh my gosh, like, what's happening? Obviously, Pip doesn't leave, and so a person pulls up who's the drug dealer, and Pip, like, the second he sees Pip, he, like, the car speeds away, and they have this, like, high-speed chase. Pip is chasing this man, because they're like, oh, maybe this person knows something about, or, like, why don't they want to speak to Pip? Something about that. And they're chasing him, and essentially they find out that it's Luke Eaton. Luke Eaton is the drug dealer that, like, didn't want to see Pip. And another thing that Robin said was that Luke was really mad because someone took $900 from him and never paid it back. Important detail. But yeah, like, Luke eventually gets away, and it's like they can't really do anything about it. So the next morning, something very scary happens. So, like, in the morning, like, getting ready for school, on the radio, they found a male body in, like, his 20s, dead. And so the Reynolds family and Pip, they're all like, oh my gosh, is it Jamie? Like, they were so scared. And they're, like, all huddled around the radio. Eventually they found out it wasn't Jamie, but because of this situation, Arthur Reynolds kind of admits the truth of the situation, that his son really is in danger, and he agrees to do an interview. So what we learned from Arthur's interview is that him and Jamie have been fighting a lot, and right before he disappeared, they had a fight about Jamie asking him for $900, the same amount that someone took from Luke Eaton and needed to pay back. So, therefore, there's some connection between Jamie Reynolds and Luke Eaton. Something like he was borrowing money for some reason. So, in an effort to go find Luke, Pip goes to Nat's house. At this point, I guess I should mention that Nat is not a fan of Pip at all. Because, I mean, in the last book, you know, Pip, like, accused her of murder on, like, in her podcast, and so, like, good on Nat. I'm on team Nat always. And so Nat's going through a lot. She's been very active in Max Hastings' rape case trial, because Nat was also a victim of his drugs and rape, and so she's been going through a lot of that, trying to make Max being proved guilty, because he is. So she's been going through a lot of that, and Pip has been kind of bugging her a lot with all her, you know, her mysteries and whatnot. So Pip goes back over there, and Nat is like, what do you want? Like, I don't want to talk to you. And Pip is just, like, trying to ask about Luke, and then Nat reveals that her and Luke broke up because Luke was cheating on her with a girl named Layla. So that's the connection. This really is the circle of Layla. So all these men trying to, you know, have been hyper fixated on Layla. So they're broken up now, but so, like, now that's another piece of information that Pip knows, that, like, Luke also has a connection to Layla. So she's like, okay, I really gotta talk to Luke. But as she's leaving Nat De Silva's house, she's, like, walking down the road, and she suddenly gets the news. I don't remember, I think maybe why do I keep calling him Ravi? Robbie called her or something. I don't know how she found out, but she finds out that essentially Max Hastings' court trial is over, and he has been declared innocent. Despite there being a literal audio file of him being like, admitting that he's guilty, all these witnesses and everything, he has been proven innocent. So Pip immediately turns around and runs back into Nat's house, and is immediately, like, comforting her, because it's horrible. And so that moment is, it's not super significant, but it really is. It's, like, a really beautiful moment in the book. That's, like, when Pip and Nat's relationship kind of changes from Nat being like, Pip, please stop talking to me, please stop bothering me, to being literal, like, really, really good friends. So that's very important. And so I also don't remember when this bit happened. I'm pretty sure this already happened earlier in the book, but why not bring it up now? So there's also these people in town named Charlie and Flora Day. I'm getting the card, don't worry. Charlie Day. I'm gonna put him here. Charlie Day. Him and his wife Flora live in town, and he has kind of been helping Pip a little bit, like, throughout the book, with tips and stuff. He basically gave her this tip about, like, Jamie literally broke into his house and stole his watch. Like, insane stuff. And it's, like, on his security camera and stuff. And so she, like, is like, I don't know, it's just something that, like, she knows something weird's going on with, like, Jamie and, like, trying to steal monetary things. Like, he needs money for some reason. But yeah, just thought I should throw it in there now. So go back to Luke Eaton. So then Pip talks to Luke. She's like, bruv, what's going on? Like, you're talking to Layla too? And Jamie was, like, asking for $900. And he was like, yeah, I was talking to Layla until, you know, like, so I don't know how to say this without spoiling. Basically, Luke planned to meet up with Layla, and he goes to this, like, park or something, and he gets out of his car and he goes to where they're supposed to meet, and Jamie's there. And so Luke is talking to Pip, and he's like, Jamie is Layla. And it's like this big, like, what? Because why would Jamie be texting Layla if he is Layla? Like, nothing makes sense. And so the other piece of information Luke gives is that when he was there, like, he showed up and all Jamie said was Child Brunswick. And Luke was like, what are you doing? Luke was like, are you kidding me? And so they're like, what is Child Brunswick? And that is, like, a really big piece of information that Pip has been given. So Pip, now, she, like, recognizes that. So she goes home and she Googles Child Brunswick. It brings up this whole thing. To summarize, essentially, Child Brunswick, his dad, Scott Brunswick, was a serial killer a while ago. And Child Brunswick was, like, a kid, his son, and he helped lure in kids for him to kidnap and then murder. But because of the Witness Protection Program, his real name's, like, obviously his real name's not Child Brunswick, that's just the nickname the media has given him. His real name has been classified, and he, like, moves around a lot, and he changes names every time so that he's not identified and that he's not, like, harmed, that kind of thing. It's just protecting him, aka the Witness Protection Program. So that's what Child Brunswick is. So Pip comes to the conclusion that Layla Mead is looking for Child Brunswick, because for it to make sense, he would have been, like, around 29 years old at the time, and he would be, like, a white male with brown hair, and that fits all of these profiles except Jamie, who lied about being 29. He was like, I'm 24 actually, and that's why Layla immediately stopped talking to him. But then he was like, I'll do anything for you. So then Layla recruited him to help find Child Brunswick. But then, like, Luke, Adam, and Daniel all fit the same, like, 29 years old white male. But Daniel De Silva, police officer, so obviously he wouldn't be, like, someone in the Witness Protection Program wouldn't be a police officer, and same with being a teacher. So Luke Eaton was, like, one of the suspects. And I don't know how to transition into this, but, like, I honestly don't remember this part, but Stanley Forbes also fits that bill. And, like, Pip somehow figures out that he's also, like, could be Child Brunswick, and then she literally finds out in, like, 20 seconds that Stanley Forbes is Child Brunswick. So Child Brunswick is him. So that's who Layla was trying to find. But I'm, like, she doesn't, basically what happened, and I'm trying not to reveal Layla's identity, but she, oh my god, a noise. So scary. But, like, she sent Jamie, and basically Jamie went to Luke and just said Child Brunswick, but Luke didn't react, so it was fine. Jamie went to Stanley Forbes and said Child Brunswick. Stanley did react, and then, you know, like, what happened? Oh, actually, Jamie was instructed to kill him. That didn't happen, though. So basically, Pip doesn't really know that yet, but Pip is going to find Stanley because she thinks Stanley is holding Jamie, I keep calling him Jamie captive, which he is. So she sends Connor and Ravi, oh god, what do I keep calling Ravi into Stanley's house while she lures Stanley out and talks to him. And so they're in the house. They find Jamie in the basement. Jamie is in Stanley Forbes' basement. So that's where Jamie's been all this time, in his basement. After Jamie tried to kill him because he was Child Brunswick and Layla instructed Jamie to do that. So Pip is talking to Stanley, and Stanley basically explains all this stuff about like he was a serial killer as a child, but like he wanted a new life, and like that wasn't like he was like manipulated into doing it, you know, and all this stuff. And then basically this really just happens. It's so much better in the book than how I'm explaining it, but Charlie Day is Layla Mead. And he shows up and he's like, hello. And then he's like, basically what happened, Charlie Day as a kid had a twin sister, and that twin sister was the final victim of Child Brunswick's dad. So like Child Brunswick, aka Stanley Forbes, like killed Charlie Day's twin sister, and he has spent his entire life trying to find Child Brunswick, track him down, and kill him. And that's why he pretended to be Layla Mead, and he was trying to talk to all of these 29-year-old men in the area, because he was like, I know he lives in this area, he's been tracking him his whole life, all this stuff, to try to finally find him, Stanley Forbes. So now they're in this house. It's Pip, Stanley Forbes, and Charlie Day. They're all there, and Charlie's like, I'm gonna kill you, and Pip is like, no. Pip is like, please stop, because Pip sees Stanley's side of it. She's like, she understands, like, he was like a child, he didn't have really a choice in it at all, and so she empathizes with Stanley, and so she's like, no, Charlie, please don't do this, like, please don't kill him. Charlie does kill him, so Stanley Forbes is dead, R.I.P. And then Charlie Day runs away, essentially. He's just like gone. And then Pip is traumatized, and Jamie is now free and returned safely home. I think that kind of sums it up. Yeah, like Jamie's safe, Pip's back, Charlie's gone. And we solved the missing case of Jamie Reynolds. But so she put this all on a podcast for season 2, and again did great. Oh my god. But like at the end of this book, she really is like horribly traumatized. And she talks to I don't remember if she talks to Detective Hawkins or Daniel De Silva, but one of them she talks to, and she's like, I don't know, it's just such a it's like haunting, because like they could have done so much to help her to prevent this from happening if they just listened to her, but they didn't. And I remember there's this scene where like in the beginning of the book when she went to them and she was like Jamie's missing, they were like, well, we have like an 8-year-old who's missing right now who's more high priority, and she's sitting in the police station after watching Stanley die and Charlie Day like escaping, and her like she's like all bloody from Stanley's blood, all this stuff, and she's just sitting there and she's like in such a daze, and she's like, what happened to the 8-year-old? And they were like, oh, she was returned days ago. And it's just like, oh, love the police. So yeah, it's kind of the end of this book. Everyone's safe and sound except Pip is traumatized. Okay, so now we're transitioning onto the third book, so we're gonna take down the people we don't need. So Zoe Reynolds, Stella Chapman, Adam Clark, these background people we don't need. Robin's not coming back. Who else? Luke. Luke does have a bit of a part. Charlie Day, he's just like off now. He's just missing now, so we don't really need him. Arthur Reynolds and Joanna Reynolds, I mean, they make appearances in the book, but it's not really plot based. It's more of just like they are just so thankful to Pip for finding their darling baby boy. Kara and Naomi still there. Connor and Jamie are still relevant. Max is still relevant, and I'm still keeping that star there despite him being proven innocent. Detective Hawkins, yep, Natalie, and I mean, Pip's mom is in the book obviously, but she's not really that much of a showstopper. Oh, and the fan's on again. Period. Love that. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, So book 3 of the trilogy is called Good as Dead, and it's for sure like the darkest book. It it really just takes such a different approach, and I love it so much. It might be my favorite. I'm not sure. I just love it. So there's a lot going on here. So basically the book starts with Pip and Max kind of having a, it's not a court agreement, but they have their lawyers in the room and they have like a mediator, and they're trying to come to an agreement because in the second book, Pip released audio of Max just completely admitting to doing the crime because she was like, I need people to know about this, and so true, she should have. But Max was like gonna press charges for defamation and all this stuff. So they're trying to come to an agreement, and Pip is essentially like, I hate you. So the beginning of the book is really just establishing how much of a bad person Max Hastings is. And of course, he just is. He's just a horrible person. So then another thing to point out, Pip is very traumatized from everything that happened in the last book. Watching someone die in front of her was very rough. So she's been trying to get over it by essentially doing drugs. Luke Eaton, town drug dealer, is selling her drugs. That's kind of all Luke's here for, but you know, he does sell her some drugs. Other than that, Luke's pretty much pointless. Another thing is, throughout the second book and into this book, she has been getting these threats that started online, but now into this book are getting more like dangerous and like threatening, which the threat basically says, when you disappear, who will come and find you? Because she's so known for finding people that have disappeared. That's kind of like the thing. At first she kind of ignored it, but now it's getting to be kind of a lot. There's kind of a lot of threats happening, and basically, okay, in her driveway there have been some dead pigeons that have their head chopped off, which concerning, right? And there have also been little stick figures, 5 stick figures to be specific, that have their heads chopped off as well. And she's just been getting a lot of threats kind of thing. For example, another threat that she got was literal stuff printing out of her own printer that says like, when you disappear, who's gonna find you, like showing that that person was like so close. So essentially Pip has a stalker, and that's scary. So what does she do? She goes to none other than Detective Hawkins, hoping that maybe he'll help her out, because the whole thing with stalking is like, if you have more than 2 or more reasons, like examples of stuff, then you can go to the police. And Pip has like a ton of stuff. She's got the pigeons in the driveway, she has the headless people on her driveway, the stuff printing out of her printer, she's been getting weird phone calls, and on one of her runs, her running route, which she does every day the same, it's a dead girl walking on like the sidewalk, and so it's really spooky. But Detective Hawkins essentially brushes it off, because of course he does. He's like the worst police officer in the history of the world. He says like, oh, the dead pigeons, it's probably just like a cat that got to it. The dead girl walking thing wasn't even on her property, so it probably wasn't even for her. This chalk thing, and he like, she took a picture of the chalk and he was like, I don't even see it. So he doesn't do anything. So essentially Pip has a stalker, and it's kind of just up to her and Ravi. Like, she's told Ravi about all this stuff. Ravi is freaked out. Ravi hates this whole thing that she has a stalker, and like, I would be too. So it's really scary. And so basically she starts to do some research, because she's like, what could, like, she Googles about the pigeons and the headless stick figures, and she kind of comes across this serial killer in her town called the DT Killer. Gotta put that right there. That was really hard to stick on. So the DT Killer, and basically DT stands for duct tape, and basically has done all this kind of stuff. Basically he has killed 5 girls in the town, and the last girl that he killed was on the day that Andy Bell died. After that he didn't do anything. I'm pretty sure that's true, don't quote me on that. Should I put Andy Bell on the board? I think I should. We're gonna put Andy Bell right here, right next to Daniel De Silva. Andy Bell's gonna go right there. So yeah. what am I trying to say? So the DT killer has done the stuff with like the stick figures in the driveway, the pigeons, the phone calls, all this stuff. But the thing is, he is in jail. Like, he's been locked up, and he has been for years. And his identity, oh, it's coming. His identity is Billy Carras. I'm sure they're not saying that name. Carras? I don't know. Billy. And so Billy Karras, like, he admitted to being the DT killer, and everyone was like, "Oh, great, he's it," and case closed. But his confession was just really suspicious, and Pip like looked at everything and was like, he just doesn't seem like he's telling the truth that he really was. He looks like he's being threatened into saying that he was the DT killer. So she basically just does a bunch of research into this case because she's like, I think this DT killer is stalking me, but like he's in jail, but like what's going on? So she comes across Maria Carras. I'll put her down here. Maria is, if you can't tell by the name, Maria is Billy's mom. And Maria is like, I know Billy didn't do this. And so this whole time that Billy's been in jail for the past like 5 years, Maria has been working to prove his innocence. So Pip is like, period, I'm going to talk to her. And Maria basically just like confirms her suspicions that Billy didn't do it. And she's very like confident about it. And so Maria kind of gives her tips that Billy worked at Jason Bella. I'll put Jason Bella up here. I can't put him up there. I'll put him over here. No, I can't put him over here. I don't know where to put him. I'll put him here. Billy worked at Jason Bell's company. And so there's a lot of stuff that like just like happened to point to Billy, because like the duct tape from Jason's company was used to, basically what the DT killer does is he like wraps up the girl's like arms and legs and stuff and then duct tapes their entire face, and then they're just found dead. So like that duct tape was used, so which Billy would have had access to, and then Billy had like interactions with a few of the girls, just like happened to have interactions with them before they died, and so that was like, it just like happened to fall upon him. And then in the police station, they held him in there for like 7 hours. Like they kept him in there for so long. They were like, are you gonna confess? Are you gonna confess? And so he just did it because he was like so tired and he just wanted to go home. Which is so real. And so basically Pip is like, okay, I don't think it's him. I think the DT killer is out there and he's after me. And so really spooky. So she's like, okay, I want to talk to some other like witnesses or whatever. So she comes across one of the victim's sister, Harriet Hunter, who we're gonna put right there. Oh, that's like tilted. There we go. Harriet Hunter is the sister of one of the victims, and Pip goes and talks to Harriet. Basically, she finds out eventually that Harriet talked to Andy Bell. Where is she? Andy Bell. She like had a friendship with Andy Bell, and if you remember, you probably don't, way back in book 1 in Andy's planner that Pip found when she broke into the Bell's house, it had HH, which originally Pip assumed meant Howie's house because she was thinking about the drug dealing with Howie and stuff. HH actually stood for Harriet Hunter, which came back in this book. So Andy was meeting with Harriet Hunter and talking about the DT killer, and essentially Andy, so like, okay, Pip finds out that Andy has a connection to Harriet Hunter, and she's like, I need to figure out more, and she's like, I need to break into Andy's email. So then she talks to Becca Bell. Becca Bell is still in jail, but they call like every week. They have like a scheduled call. I'm not gonna put Becca Bell up because all she does is she helps Pip break into Andy's email. So she breaks into the email. She finds a draft in Andy's like secret second email that essentially says that Andy knows who the DT killer is, and it says like he's practically one of them and like stuff like that. And she's like, oh, he's like under our noses this whole time. And so based on the timeline, Pip has a suspect of who it's going to be, and that's going to be Daniel Da Silva. Pip thinks that Daniel Da Silva is the DT killer because Andy's saying he's practically one of them. At the time, Daniel was training to be a police officer, and saying he's practically one of them, but him being like a serial killer just makes sense. Like, oh my god, he's practically like one of the ones who were supposed to take down the serial killers. It makes sense. And Daniel De Silva is just a sus guy. So Pip thinks that it's him. And yeah, so basically Pip is like, I need to figure out that this is Daniel De Silva. So she's been getting these phone calls from the DT killer, and she's like, okay, I got this. So she downloads this app that when a no caller ID calls you, you hang up, and then it like the number pops up, like you're able to discover what number is calling you, something like that. And so one day, Pip is out on a run, and she gets the call, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is it. And she's like, talk to Robbie about this, and they're like, oh yes, this is such a great plan. And so she gets the call, and then she hangs up, and she sees the number, and she's like, boom, I got it, this is the number. And she calls it the number back, and she's like calling her, and something's weird, and she's like hears ringing behind her. She hears the ringing of the phone behind her, not the phone that she's holding, but the phone that she's calling right behind her. And then suddenly there's a hand over her mouth, and she's being picked up, and she's being dragged into a car. So Pip just got kidnapped. It's a lot more dramatic in the book, and I was literally like peeing my pants. It was really spooky. So Pip is now kidnapped by the DT killer, who she believes, I don't know why I did DT killer in quotes, she believes is Daniel De Silva, and she's like, oh my god, I'm in Daniel De Silva's car. And she's like putting fingerprints all around the trunk, because she's like, I got it. She knows so much about like stats on, she was like, if I get taken to a second location, it's like less than 1% chance I survive, so I have to like get out of this car. But then she doesn't. She gets taken like all the way out to this like warehouse where the trunk opens, and she sees none other than Jason Bell. Jason Bell kidnapped her. The reveal was crazy. Jason Bell is the DT killer. So, sorry, Daniel De Silva. You're a sus man, but not a serial killer. Jason Bell kidnapped her, and Jason Bell had murdered those 5 other girls in the past and all that stuff. And Andy Bell knew, which is why it was so significant in her email, because she knew that it was her dad. Like, insane. So Pip is in like complete survival mode right here. She's like screaming, she's trying to get out of her restraints and all this stuff, and Jason's just being the grossest possible person. And so basically he like takes her to the basement, and she's down there, and he like tapes her all up like he did to the other victims, tapes up her face, her arms, her legs, and then he drives away. And so she's like, this is my chance. So basically, after a long struggle, it's like, it took her like literally like 2 hours, I think. Like, it was a long struggle, and she escaped, essentially. It was like like, I'm really summarizing this quickly here, but she does escape, and she uses a hammer, and she breaks through, because she's in like a basement, so she breaks through the like window, and she gets out, and she runs. And then as she's running, she turns around, and she sees that Jason's car had pulled into the driveway. And suddenly in her brain, she's immediately thinking, so like, what happens next? She runs home to Fairview, she goes to the police, and she says Jason Bell's the DT killer, and they're gonna be like, well, no, Billy Carras is the DT killer, he's in jail for that right now, and Jason Bell's like our angel sweetheart, we love him. And Detective Hawkins has never believed a word she said in her life, even though it all turns out to be true. And like, she thinks about the thing with Max, about how he was proven innocent even though he was guilty. And so she's essentially like, they're not gonna believe me, and Jason Bell isn't gonna be punished at all for this, and then he's just gonna come at me again. Like, he's just gonna come back for me, and he's gonna kill me that time. So what she did, she is just she's so enraged, as she should be, because of the whole system. She turns around and she runs back to the place where she was kidnapped to, and she watches as Jason like walks down to the basement, and she uses the hammer that she used to break through the window to bash that man's skull in, and she murders him. So Good Girls Guide to Murder, literally. Pip, I mean, I feel like, I hate to say that we were like building to this moment, but like we really were. Pip finally killed someone. So Pip murders Jason Bell, essentially, is what just happened, and I can't stress that enough. So now she's like, oh my god, like, oh my god. And so she goes into Jason's car where he has her bag because he took it from her. She uses her phone, she calls Robbie, and she's like, Robbie, you need to come to this location right now. You can't take highways where there's cameras and everything. You need to take back roads. Because she's like, I don't want to get caught for murder, but even more, I don't want Robbie to get caught for murder, like as an accomplice or whatever. So she calls Robbie, and he comes there, and she's like, I killed Jason Bell. And it's just, like, from that moment on in the book, it's so tense, and the suspense, like, it's so good. It goes so dark immediately, and it's so good. So the rest of the book is essentially them covering up the murder that they just did, and they do it flawlessly. So basically, here's the thing. So Pip, at the beginning of the book, was studying ways to make it seem like a dead body had died later than it did. It's like a tactic for covering up murders. And so there's basically these methods of, like, if you like put the body in a really hot space and put it in a really cold space, and then also like flip the body over so the blood settles on the other side. It's like there's ways to make it seem like Pip, who had killed Jason around 6 p.m., the body could have been killed more like 9 o'clock or 10 p.m. So Pip's like, we need to do that. We're gonna make it seem like he died around 9ish, 10ish, and we're gonna give ourselves alibis for that time so that we're not suspects. And that's exactly what they do. So basically, Robbie, we don't hear a lot from during the time when he's got his alibi, but they like set up Jason's body in his car, and they turn it on just like freezing cold, and they flip it so that the blood's resettling and he's freezing cold, so his muscles are all like, that's like how they test how long the body's been dead, because if it's been dead a while, then it's like really, like, it's either really hard or really soft, I don't remember, but something like that. So Robbie then, he goes somewhere with someone, like a friend, but he's just like gone the whole night, and that's his alibi, and it's great. Then Pip has a bit more of a detailed plan, because first of all, she's got like blood all over her. She's got blood all over her. She needs to like figure that out. She needs to get rid of the evidence. She needs to get rid of her fingerprints and her hairs and all that stuff, and she needs to blame the murder on someone else. So she needs to do all that, and she doesn't want Robbie having anything to do with it. She wants to do it herself. So she needs to frame someone else for murder, and she needs to give herself an own alibi. And then at around midnight, Pip and Robbie are gonna meet back up at that place, at the warehouse place, where they will again flip the body and then turn the car on really hot so that the body again will like make it seem like it died a lot later, and then they will hide the body and make it seem like someone else did it. So here's exactly what Pip does. Pip, I'm pointing to Robbie. Pip goes to see the Reynoldses. I'm pretty sure she goes to see Jamie and Connor, and then I'm pretty sure Nat just happens to be there, but it's definitely Nat, Connor, and Jamie. She gets them all, and she's like, look, I can't tell you what's going on, and you can't ask me what's going on, and you can never talk to each other about what you're gonna do right now. You just need to never speak about it again. And they're like, what did you do? Like, it's so spooky. And she's like, I can't tell you what I'm gonna do, but I promise that in the end, it'll end up with Max Hastings in jail. And so it's basically Pip framing Max Hastings for the murder that she did. Like, God, it's so good. And so they basically go to Max Hastings' house. Max is alone. His parents are like somewhere else. And Pip uses the drugs that Luke Eaton gave her to drug Max. She sneaks into his house while Nat is at his door, because Nat and Max hate each other. So Nat is at his door, and she literally like punches him, and it's like distraction time. And so Pip goes in and she drugs his water. He falls asleep. She goes in, she steals his phone, she steals his shoes, and she steals his sweatshirt. And so that's all gonna help frame him for this murder. So basically what she does is she gets the phone, she puts it in a Ziploc, and she gives it to Connor. And she's like, Connor, take back roads, don't take the highway where there's cameras, take back roads and go to this location, which is where the dead body is, and plant the phone like under this rock. And so the phone will be there, and we'll just like wait a second to find out what happens with that. And he's just like, okay. And so then Pip has the shoes and the sweatshirt and stuff. And so then Pip goes to the Ward's house. She goes to visit Kara and Naomi, who's like her best friends ever. She wasn't really close with Naomi at the beginning, but now she really is. So what am I trying to say? She goes to the Ward's house and she's like, I need to make a call. And she goes to the phone and she calls the lawyer, Max's lawyer that she was talking to at the beginning. And she's like, okay, I finally agreed to your terms and stuff like that. And she's like, whatever, we can like do the deal. Which would then mean that lawyer would call Max. And so Max's phone is at the place of the murder and through the cell towers somehow. That means that like it would be definite that Max's phone was there. Like they would be able to track that, and like the police would be able to track that, the location of his phone when he got that call. So now that he's calling Max, like it's confirmed that like Max's phone at least was there. And why would his phone be there if he wasn't there and murdering Jason Bell? So that's a whole thing. And then Pip is basically like to Kara and Naomi, kind of similar to what she said to Jamie, Connor, and Nat. She was like, I can't tell you what's going on. It's gonna be weird, and like you can never speak to each other about it ever again, and we can never speak about it ever again. But I just need you to just like stay quiet, and we're just gonna go to McDonald's. So basically, what Pip does, the whole point of this alibi is that they go to like they make the most trace ever possible that they were there. So they go through the highway where there's cameras everywhere. They go to McDonald's, which is like really busy. They make transactions on Pip's credit card, proving that she was there. They're like the cameras in the McDonald's, obviously. All this stuff. She buys some McFlurries, like she's buying a lot. There's just a clear trace that at that night at like 10 p.m. she was not with Jason's body. She was out with her friends. So that's what they do. And then they go home. It's like a very, I mean, like they're at McDonald's and they all know that something really like dark is happening, but they just like can't ask her about it. And it's just like so, it's crazy to read. So then they go home. You know, Kara and Naomi are just like, they're at home. Pip's night is not done though. Pip and Robbie again at midnight-ish meet up at where the body is, and they flip the body, they turn on the heater, and then they clean up the place. They get rid of all of Pip's fingerprints and all this stuff. And then once the body's ready, Pip takes it and wraps it up in something, and she throws Jason's body in the woods while wearing Max's sneakers, and then also getting some of his blood on Max's sweatshirt, just so there's like a trace. And so they would like, when the police go and they look in the mud and they see the tracks, they're gonna be like, oh, whose shoes are those? And it's of course Max Hastings. So that was the whole thing. And then what happened after that? I think after that they just went home. And then yeah, and then like Pip was just like scrubbing bleach on her bloody clothes all night. And then for a few weeks after that, like obviously her and Pip couldn't literally not talk about this unless they were like in person. Like they couldn't text about it, they couldn't do anything. And so it was just a very stressful few, like 2 weeks I think, where they were like, are we gonna get away with it, are we not? Oh, I should also mention they set the building on fire afterwards, after they hid Jason's body in the woods. So like obviously someone found that burning building, and so they were like, why is no one finding it, like what's going on? And they did find it. And so there was like this big announcement from Detective Hawkins about like Jason Bell has been found dead and we think it's been a homicide. And so Pip's like, okay, here we go. And then so the whole thing is that they're trying to like act as normal as possible. And obviously if there was a murder that went down in her town, what would be the most normal Pip thing to do? She would make a podcast season about it. So she starts to make a literal podcast season on the murder of Jason Bell that she did. But she's like acting like she doesn't know anything. She's playing it flawlessly. And she begins to hint in like the very first episode that it was probably Max Hastings, just to like set the police on his tail. And so it's like this whole thing. And then the next, like, I don't know if it was the next day, next morning, I don't know. Very soon after, she gets called into the police station. And she's like, oh god, like they know what I've done. She gets called in, and basically, again, I think it was Detective Hawkins, not Daniel. yeah, Detective Hawkins is like, he's like you can't really like post podcasts about like an ongoing case, and he's like, it's very clear, because she didn't exactly say in the podcast that it was Max Hastings, but she very clearly hinted it. And so he was like, we all know you were talking about Max Hastings, and you can't really do that. And she was like, I didn't do anything, I don't know what you're talking about. And so he starts talking to her about like that. Also in the parking lot before all that happened, he said to her, Pip, I bet if you did something like this, you know how to get away with it. Like a very hint, hint, nudge, nudge of him. You know what I'm saying? And so that was interesting. But then he's just like, he's acting a little weird, and Pip is just like very put off by it, because she's like, does he know what I've done? And so he kind of like leaves the room, and then he comes back, and then he starts just like small talking her, and he's talking about like podcast stuff, because apparently like his niece or nephew or something wants to be like a podcaster or whatever, and he wants like microphones and headphones. So he starts to get Pip to talk about like her headphones, what headphones she uses, and it has like this huge like Good Girls Guide to Murder sticker on the top of it. And so, and Pip's also been like talking about how she hasn't seen Jason Bell in months, like, you know, she hasn't like been involved with him or anything. And so then Detective Hawkins pulls out Pip's pair of headphones and says, so Pip, why did we find this in Jason Bell's house? And Pip thinks that she's literally done for. She thinks, oh my god, they know that I murdered him. But she just acts like, oh, what? I don't know where that's from. And he's like, yeah, we found your headphones in Jason Bell's room. What's that about? And basically the real story is that for every murder victim of Jason Bell, he takes up like a literal souvenir from them. Like he took one of the girl's earrings, and he took another one's hairbrush. Gross. And so he took Pip's headphones. That was supposed to be his like trophy for murdering her. But obviously he didn't succeed. But he had those anyway. And so that was suspicious. And so she left there being like, oh my god, he knows, like, I'm done for. They're gonna like arrest me. But then she tells this to Ravi, and then Ravi's like, no, we're not going down. We've come this far. We can explain it. It's just headphones. So Ravi goes, Pip is completely ready to go to the police station and turn herself in just because she doesn't want any of her friends to go down with her. That's her whole thinking. And so Ravi goes first without telling her, and Ravi's like explains it, and he's like, oh yeah, I was borrowing Pip's headphones, and I went to go like check on Jason Bell and something, and like something about an internship or something, I don't know, like he like explained it away, and he was like, oh yeah, I just took this there. And the police believed him, I guess. But like still, despite the police believing him, what was I gonna say? Detective Hawkins, I feel like some part of him definitely knew it was Pip. But I'm almost like, I don't know if he like gave it, I don't know, it's hard to decide. Maybe he's just stupid. But yeah, so basically Ravi explains it and is like, yeah, she's good, right as Pip is about to go in and turn herself in. But Pip is so mad at Ravi for doing that, because she doesn't want Ravi to have any involvement. Like, she doesn't want him to go down with her if she goes down. And so that makes it like he's like an accomplice now. And so she's just like, basically this is like really close to the end of the book, and she's like, look, like they know it's Max, essentially. There were like police cars outside of Max's house. They are basically like on Max's trail. So we just need to wait it out, basically. That's what she tells Ravi. She's like, we cannot talk to each other, especially through like text, until the whole case is over. And it's just this really emotional thing, because like they both know the murder case could take literal years. So it could be years until they talk to each other again. And they're both about to start like college. Actually, I don't even know how old Ravi is. Pip's about to start college though, and so she's like moving away, and like all this stuff is happening, and it was so sad. I was sobbing. And so like Ravi was sobbing in the woods, Pip was sobbing in the woods, and they were both just like, because of this murder, like we cannot speak to each other ever until he is proven guilty, Max. And so they say goodbye, and it's so sad. Just because Pip doesn't want Robbie to go down for her. Like, if she's gonna go down, she's going down alone, and Robbie doesn't want that, and it's like a whole thing. But then basically there's like a sort of, you can't even call it an epilogue, it's like a literal page, but it's a page where it's like 100 and something days later, like so many days later. And well, I guess that's not even a year. Wait, no, I'm wrong. I don't know how many days. I feel like it was over a year and something days later, whatever. It was a long time later. And it was like Max Hastings' case declared guilty. So like Max was finally declared guilty, and then it's immediately like a text to Pip from Robbie saying, "Sarge, remember me?" And it's so cute. It's so cute. So essentially, their entire murder plot worked somehow. And Max Hastings, the dude who never got blamed for a single thing that he did this entire time, was finally convicted for the one thing he didn't do. And that's so satisfying. So I love this series, and it's like it goes so much more in depth even than what I said here. Like, the detail put into every single thing in this series is insanity, and it's the only trilogy that I've ever rated like all 3 books 5 stars, so it's like crazy. I love it the most. I love Holly Jackson, and I can't wait for the BBC show. I'm gonna literally eat that up. But yeah, that's A Good Girl's Guide to Murder.